before you ask anything, what me and Sadiq did was re-entry from his perspective. You know, I asked him questions about the things that you learned, you know, from that previous lifestyle, what you brought with you. You know, how difficult was it, you know, to adjust, you know, in the community with dealing with, you know, with because I brought up, you know, like different terminologies like respect, you know, humility, language, you know, and things like that, because where we come from, we were taught and trained a certain way to communicate, just period. And how different that is in society, you know, and how
it may not always work out here in society what you were trained
exactly
to do your
and
whole life.
And so how do we adjust? You know, and then,
what made the difference in your ability to adjust successfully?
Right.
I think those are what I'd like to focus on. What were the key factors that made it possible for you to come home and develop a new mindset, a new set of goals and aspirations, and to be able to accomplish them? Because that's what we have to do for the folks who are coming out now, or the folks who walk through that door. I'm okay with doing a whole bunch of talking amongst staff, but what I really want is that session we had this morning with the family. That's what I want to take to show how us actually doing the work.
Right.
When you go out, when Dre goes out to somebody's house and boots on the ground doing some interventions, that's what I want to record. And then we can look at it and process it and explain this why Dre did what he did based on our model.
So I can say for me, right? And I think that I have to say for me, you know, because the way I process help for a person, you know, may differ, you know, from someone else's perspective on what that help looks like, right? Now, the one thing that I have learned that that just because you have the natural ability to help other people, you have that heart desire, you know, and those type of things, right? You know, sometimes, you know, they might not be the healthy things to do, you know, because of the other portion of the business, right? The documents, the consents, you know, the gathering of information and putting it in a box, you know, so that we can justify, you know, what we're doing. So I know for me, I had to learn that I got to find a medium there. You know, I can't, you know, even though I will jump out there and just start helping somebody immediately, knowing, you know, that I wouldn't even ask to be paid for it, you know, because I know that I'm not doing what would be required procedurally, right? I'm in the mindset of, well, I'll worry about that, you know, when we get to that. When we get to that, and then who's ever next in line will benefit from what I've done, from my contribution, right? So, and I've also had to understand, right, that my service delivery may not be the next person's service delivery, so therefore I can't expect, you know, I can't expect a client or a person, you know, to receive the same thing from someone else as they receive from me, you know.
And here's the thing I find hard to do, Earl, is for the client to understand that the next person is not going to be Earl.
Right.
It's not going to be Dr. Black.
Right.
You might not get that same energy. Hopefully it's the same love, but it might not be the same style or the same energy. And I have found in my time doing this with my life is that sometimes it's difficult if I'm involved and then I pass somebody on to somebody else, because then they don't measure up to what the person thought they were going to get because they got used to me. Does that make
Yes.
sense? So I think about the family who came in today and you've been around the clock almost helping this family. And then they get in with a Miss Jean, and but she not like Earl.
Right.
Or Earl said, and then giving her a hard time and can't get through the process.
Right.
You know, how do we combat that?
So I'm not sure, you know, other than I think that a different type of handoff has to be put into place. And I think that maybe a different type of process when dealing with a family in that situation where, you know, I met a person from one resource that was asking for one thing, and then when I interviewed the person, I found out a whole lot of different things were going on.
A lot of different needs that they have.
That required immediate action, right? So, but I just believe that I guess sometimes you gotta expect, you know, your co-workers, your partners, whoever it is, you know, that's involved in this process with you to step up in the same regard instead of saying, hey, you know, I did all I can do for you and now it's time for me to hand you off, right? And that's a difficulty in itself, you know, and I experienced that today. I didn't experience that by verbally saying it. I allowed my interactions non-verbally to show you that you have other people in place now, right? And I think that now my final discussion should reflect towards, you know, now that you've gone through what you needed to go through, you're going to have X, Y, and Z in your life. Now I started that today.
And I'm not going anywhere, but I'm no longer going to be your primary
Right.
go-to person.
Right.
And being very clear about that.
Right. And I think that that's you know, and that's difficult too, you know, especially again, and I can't tell you how many times in the last 7.5 years it's happened to me that no matter what I say, I'm still looked at as somebody of some form of authority, you know, that I'm not. You know, I'm not I'm not.
But you are.
I just can't, you know, just the way I look at it, right? I come from a different type of life, right? And I chose, well, the behavioral health field chose me, you know? I was speaking about it earlier about this being hereditary. My father was a licensed psychologist.
How come I didn't never know that?
Well, I'm telling you now. My mother was a nurse practitioner who was badly injured in a state mental hospital. So I've learned to embrace that. I learned to embrace that, hey, you know, my dad was this, you know, and look what I've become. Not because I said my dad is this and this is what I want to be. I tried to do everything other than that.
And they still brought you back.
You feel me?
Right here.
So it brought me back in a way. It brought me back in a way that I could not truly understand in the beginning. You know, and I still think that that's something.
You just realizing you built for this.
Exactly.
You were built and created for this right here, and everything you went through leading up to this prepared you for this.
Exactly. Without me knowing, you know, without that being my direction or design.
So knowing what your role is, and then how to, because I find when those clients who you brought them in, you got them enrolled and through the process, and they may still call you, you got to set boundaries too, to say, you calling me, but, and I might not even answer the phone. I might text back to say, have you checked with your team? Before you tell me, I need to know that you have gone through your team and there was an issue.
So,
because it's going to be real easy to always call you or me first.
So you know what I do? I don't even answer the call. I don't answer the text. I call the teammates. Say, hey, so-and-so is, you know, I got an email a little while ago. You know, I say they were emailing asking about X, Y, and Z. You know, and I've even had to explain to a client who came to the office to tell me to my face that they felt some kind of way that I didn't answer the phone for them. So I said, man, come here and let me talk to you.
Even though they have a whole nother staff
Exactly.
assigned.
So I'm like, come here, let me talk to you. I shook the man's hand, you know, I looked him straight in his face. I said, listen, you have a whole team of people to work with, and I've got to let them do their job. Now, if there's something beyond that scope, and you need me, I got you. You know, I think that, you know, I got you to where you can now get all of the things that you need. You know, and until there's an emergency, a crisis, or something that only I can do, you know, you gotta let your team work for you. You know, it's not fair to them.
Right.
You know, it's not fair
And
to
they
them.
feel undermined. I know they feel undermined when I jump in.
So, and so I'm mixed on that. You know, and that's because I get it from somewhere else in this building, that we're a team. And then, you know, you see something broke, go and fix it. Don't ask nobody else to fix it. But that's not always the healthy choice to make. You know, at least for stability, camaraderie, you know, and like you said, people feeling undermined and things like that, right? Now, again, this is where my previous trainings and life skills come into place. When somebody I feel like is feeling like I'm undermining them, then I have to question why do you feel like that? When we're in a space for healing, we're in a space where, you know,
It's supposed to be therapeutic.
at all costs,
We're not passing judgment.
at all costs, right? Unconditional positive regard, right? You know, and I think that sometimes those implicit biases come into play and overshadow, you know, the real objective. Now,
And it interferes with the work.
absolutely. So that's my concern. That's where I worry at. You know, I've kind of got over if something doesn't work out with a client, you know, and they come back to me and say, man, you said that this was going to happen. You said that was going to happen. No, I can accept that. You know, and the reason being is for the same things that you said, that, you know, I can't expect everybody or anybody for that matter to respond to the needs of a client the way I would. All I can do is continue to develop my skills to find that medium. That's what I'm looking for, that medium to where I'm bringing the people in. I'm giving them a level of comfort, you know, but I'm not making them feel like, you know, that they've met the Messiah, because that's not what's happening.
Right.
You know, I spoke with a young lady today, and I explained to her, you know, first of all, what I've gone through in life and how I arrived where I'm at, right? Excuse me, because I mean, at the end of the day, we all have a choice. No matter what circumstances you live up under, you know, you have a choice to either stay in a situation or to improve your situation. You know, I asked my coworker earlier, you know, what did it feel like, you know, to recover, and did you utilize a reentry service to recover? And he said no. You know, so that's it, but yet we're coworkers. So that's a testimony in itself, you know, that people that go through things can recover on their own, you know, depending on your level of resilience. But I also understand that you have persons that have not recovered on that same level. So what role do I play? Well, I guess I could be an example.
You model
of what recovery looks like, you know. But I can also say, you know, that there are some stressors in life that I did not experience. And a lot of it came from being incarcerated. Because incarceration is a structured process. It's everything is measured. You know, there's very little spontaneity. You know, especially in the day-to-day. Spontaneity may come in an act of violence. You know, that somebody else doesn't know about.
Mostly it's predictable.
Right.
In case somebody steps out of the expectation.
Right. Yeah, when you step out of line, when you step out of uniform, then that's when chaos pursues. Right?
But there is stress. I think it's just a different type of stress.
Well, no, the stress is just what I talked about. Having to live like that, day in and day out. Waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, you know, rolling your mattress up, you know, getting washed up and you ready for the door to open up at 5:45, you know, expecting violence and only feeling relief when it doesn't come. Not really appreciating when it doesn't come. Only feeling a moment of relief until, you know, the next episode. You know, because we might not make it through the day without it. You know, I mean, being in a position where, you know, you're standing on the yard and all of a sudden bombs are going off. You know, they use these percussion grenades that are, you know, can cause you to have a concussion if you're too close to it. You know, things like that. So, and so that takes away spontaneity. That even enforces the need for structure. You know, so that you or your people don't experience that, or you try to minimize that. So you would say coming from that and being in this space should be easy, but it's really not. You know, because in the community, in society, the things that we hold near and dear are, I'm not going to say non-existent or not recognized, but I'm saying it's loose. It's loose and
less structured
and unpredictable. See, unpredictability is dangerous, you know, in a world that I once lived in. And to make that transition is kind of a trip. You know, it's different. You know, I'll give you an example. Being on a date or being in the presence of a woman and she's going through something and she starts crying, you know, and then you're sitting up there thinking, what did I do? You know, and then you start going through this different kind of emotion because you don't even know how to address that. So, you know, that's when a man feels inadequate. You know, and then now you're talking about the tough guy, you know, there's even more, it's intensified. So I feel like learning how to communicate and how to understand how other people feel about their lives and what's going on around them is important, to understand that and to be able to, you know, go with the flow.
Navigate.
Go with the, yes, navigate.